First of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Randy Hunt. I'm the Community Development Director for Town of Estes Park. And by default, I guess I'm the MC here. We don't want to be too hierarchical, but we'll go with that model where at least I'll handle the logistics for you. There are other folks on our staff who are part of the meeting as well, taking notes and so on. What I'd like to do to start us off is we've got a good crowd, as I said, introduce ourselves. And my experience with Zoom meetings is that if we just leave it over to you to introduce yourselves kind of randomly, then we get people talking at the same time or waiting on another person or something like that. So what I'd like to do is I'll introduce our staff, Town of Estes, excuse me, introduce our county colleagues, and a couple of other important technical folks. And then I'll just call on each of you by name. And if when I get to your name, first forgive me if I mispronounce, but I'll try my best. And then if you'd like to just say a few words about who you represent, your firm or your partnership or whatever, and where you're located. We'll go through that fairly quickly because we want to get to the substance pretty soon. So that works for everybody. And I'll at the end of that, I'll talk about a few ground rules or a few guardrails for us in the meeting today. So I'll start off, as I said, Randy Hunt. I'm the Community Development Director for Estes Park. And I'll call next on Christy Crosser.
Hi, thank you, Randy. Yes, my name is Christy, and I'm a grants specialist for the Town of Estes Park, and so I was mostly helping Randy and his team on getting some support for the comp plan. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Christy. Jeff Wilbur is with us, our senior planner. Jeff.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Wilbur, Senior Planner with Town of Estes Park. I am going to be key in the comp plan rewrite process. So nice to be here. Welcome.
And we've also got Alex Bergeron, our planner too. Alex.
Thank you, Randy. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex, Planner 2. I've been with the town since November of 2019, and I'm happy to see so much interest in our comprehensive plan update.
Very good. Thanks, Alex. Moving down my screen on town staff. Let's see, Jennifer. Jennifer Waters has joined us. Jennifer, can you say a few words about how you happen to be?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Waters. I'm a civil engineer with Public Works. I work with development review and floodplain management. And I just wanted to attend today to listen and learn about the process and what questions may come up from the potential proposers.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I also see Karen Swanlund, who is our admin assistant. Karen, you're still muted. Karen is our note taker. She's probably busy keyboarding right now, so we won't ask you to interrupt those duties, Karen, but Karen is an important part of our team as well. Let me see, did I miss anyone from town staff? I'm looking over my screen and I do not see anyone.
Charlie.
Oh, yeah, we did forget Charlie. Were you there a minute ago? Maybe I just...
Maybe not a minute ago. I'm Charlie Rugaber, planning technician, a little new, so maybe that's why Randy forgot, but just started in November. Going to help take some notes today as well. So welcome, everyone.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Charlie. For the county, Larimer County's participation, those of you who've gone through the RFP in great detail, you'll be aware already the county has a role and an important partnership with us in this. Leslie Ellis.
Yep, that's me. I'm the county representation for... Hi, everybody. Leslie Ellis. I'm the Community Development Director at Larimer County, and I think I'm the only person here from the county today, so I'm happy to answer your questions and welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. We'll have a period a little bit later in the presentation to have Leslie comment on some of the things the county is interested in. And let's see, as far as staff, I don't see anyone, but any additional ones that have joined. I would like to recognize Michelle Stevens. Thanks, Michelle. Michelle is with Bang the Table, and you've seen in the RFP that they're a contractual partner with us for some of the public outreach. So Michelle, thanks for joining. And if there's a point that we have questions, I wouldn't ask you to present anything unless you just would prefer to. But if there are questions about how the online platform might fit into the rest, we'll hope to have you available for that. So again, thanks for coming, everybody. A few rules to keep us organized here. I'll do more of the talking than I really want to, but somebody's got to do it, and I don't mind. I've got a fondness for comprehensive plans. This will be my 5th one, and over 5 states, as a matter of fact. So they're never quite the same. They're never totally radically different, but they're always exciting. So if you guys are here to share my excitement, I hope it's contagious. In terms of how we'll proceed, I'll have some presentation. I'm really just going to confine myself to hitting the high points in the RFP document. And as I mentioned earlier, Leslie from the county will have a few items to go over with you. And then we will turn it over to you. I'd like the bulk of this to be question and answer, or hearing what's unclear or what you'd like to know more about in the RFP, and leading us on to the actual process here. Also, again, so we don't all end up talking over each other, there's a raise hand function, but I've got to admit, I have no clue how to recognize people with raising hands. So what I'll do, I think most of you, not all of you, are visible on the screen. If you are visible, if you've got your video turned on, wave your hand and I'll try and keep an eye out for the hand waving. And if you're not, if you're on the phone or can't catch our attention that way, wait for a quiet spot and then speak up. It's not meant to be overly formal.
Hey, Randy.
Yeah.
So if you have the participants list up, it will show their hand raised. I will also watch for that. So if I do see somebody, I will get your attention. So if you have that participants up.
Christy knows much more about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christy. I defer to your expertise. I would never get to the Zoom level that probably a majority of people on this call are. Us fossils in the planning realm don't always understand the 21st century. Well, let's take it away then. I'll try not to overburden you by showing the RFP on that screen because you've all got copies, you've all seen it, but there'll be a few items I'll follow up for you. First of all, the RFP has been out a week now, so thanks for your prompt response. We have 2 weeks left in the 21-day due date cycle. So that means that the RFPs, or rather the proposals, will be due for our review at 2:00 p.m. on Thursday, 2 weeks from today. That is, if my calendar is telling me truthfully, going to be February 25th. So be sure and pay close attention to that deadline. It is a hard deadline. I don't want to penalize anybody who gets it in just after 2:00, but we do have to have a pretty firm deadline to make sure we've got a level playing field. So I would ask you to please respect that. Your method of submitting, I'll touch on that in a minute. There's more than one way. So if we have electronic glitches at 2 p.m. on Thursday, 2 weeks from now, we'll have at least a second avenue and be able to get the proposals in our hands that way. In terms of the content of the RFP, let me start out by saying that, first of all, our Estes Park comprehensive plan that we've got now is a 25-year-old document. It hits year 25 later this year. And, those of you, all of you are familiar with planning, so I don't have to tell you this, but 25 years is getting to be kind of ancient history for plans. There are good many things that may have well in the 90s, but it's not the 90s anymore. It's not even the 20th century. So we've got to give a serious update to this. It is essentially a start from scratch rewrite. So I want to make that clear. There are a few, as I call them in the RFP, timeless elements that, whether truly timeless or just persistent for a long time, are worth considering and perhaps borrowing back. So as an example of something that fits in that category, one of the things that we treasure and value in Estes Valley is wildlife, right? That's a big draw for people to come here, not just to the town of Estes Park, but to the Estes Valley, up into the national park, the national forest, and so on. So as much as anything can be timeless, I would say the appeal and attraction of wildlife. That's just one example of quite a number, but to give you the sense.
Hey, Randy, Jack has
Yes.
his hand up.
Oh, all right,
Jack,
Jack.
if you'd like to unmute.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Randy. Jack Musso here with MOA Architecture. We've been working with the town of Estes Park and the Stanley Hotel for quite a few number of years. But one suggestion, if people are willing, there's generally a chat feature, although I don't see that the chat feature is turned on. If people are willing, it would be a great function to be able to have all the attendees put their name and their company's name in the chat feature. It gives you a good record of who's in attendance and from what companies. And I'd certainly be willing to do that.
We have a list of all the registrants that sent emails to Jeff. And because everybody here is panelists, because we wanted everybody to be able to ask questions and to talk, for Zoom, we don't have that chat feature for that level.
Okay. Will you be turning or distributing the attendee list?
Jeff, Randy?
I have no problem with that. I think that's reasonable.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Good logistical question there. I didn't notice we didn't have chat, but it is usually here. I guess it's optional in Zoom, isn't it? So on we go to the RFP. As I mentioned, the plan itself is meant to be a full replacement for our current comp plan. As far as timeline goes, our calendar that's in the middle of the RFP on page 4 tells the main part of the story there, at least in the broad sense. So I'm gonna make an effort to share that. Here we go. So hopefully everybody can see the RFP in a screen that shows proposed schedule. Zoom in a little bit. Everybody seeing the proposed schedule okay? Okay, I see nodding heads, good. So right now where we are is the optional pre-proposal meeting. RFP's been out for a week. We have final questions, and those can be those that arise out of this pre-proposal meeting, or they could be new ones that you might have thought about after the pre-proposal meeting, and they may come from some folks that weren't able to join the pre-proposal. But all of those are to be turned in by Tuesday, the 16th, this coming Tuesday at 2 p.m. And our answers to those questions will come 2 days later in the form of final addenda plural for addendum. So I hope we don't have a whole lot of them, but we have the option to answer questions in a single package. All of you on this call and any others that express interest but prior to that coming out or when that comes out will be sent a copy. So we will all be on the same page as far as additional information. Then our proposals are due on February 25th. I've mentioned that. That's a 2 p.m. Deadline on Thursday, the 25th. After that, we will go through proposal evaluation and negotiations. I think really the key word there is evaluation. At that stage, I'm not sure a lot of negotiation will go on, although it's in theory possible. But then we will zero in on having a final selection. That will be one firm. We do want to get single finalists for this comprehensive plan. And our goal for that is March 11th, 2021. That is, if memory serves, also a Thursday. And then you can see that we've got the rest of March and into early April to, that will be the true negotiation part with our finalists and come up with final details that would go into a contract, and then have a contract executed on April 14th. Our contracts for the town is all contracts for the town over a certain dollar amount, which we certainly are talking about substantial dollars for this, as you've seen in the RFP, go to our town board for their approval. They'll be able to review and make a final decision. The contract will be executed after they've had a formal vote on it. And April 14th is one of their regular meeting days, second Tuesday in the month of April. And then the thing that just feels like we're hitting the ground running, and it's because we are, is that we'd like to start the project no later than 2 days after that. Our town board meets on April 14th in the evening. Ideally by midday on Thursday the 16th, we'll have work outlined and start accumulating billable hours on your part and content to share with you on our part. And then the last item on the calendar list here is the completion date, December 31st, 2022. So this is a little over a 1.5-year process for the comprehensive plan. I do need to alert everybody, this has a DOLA grant, as you saw in the RFP, Department of Local Affairs. And some of you have, maybe most of you have no doubt dealt with DOLA and the stipulations they attach to their grants. One of the stipulations they're very much sticklers on is don't ask for contract extensions. If, we had a natural disaster or something like that, okay, they probably would be amenable. We'd all have to be. And we hope those don't happen, but it's never off the total possibility list. But by and large, unless it's something that's beyond anyone's control and a major interruption, they'll want a final product on or about that date. So that does include final decision-making on the comp plan by the Planning Commission and the town board. And that'll be, I'm guessing most likely during the month of December. We only have one formal scheduled meeting in December for the town board, and that's a little awkward because we won't have a late December meeting. That, of course, is holiday time. So knowing in advance that it might end up, even out of practicality, being a little earlier, I think will be beneficial to you. Any questions so far? Okay, I should have said at the beginning, actually, if anyone has questions, I'm not a believer in saying hold all your questions till the very end, because we find it produces a better flow, I think, if we can answer questions as they arise going through the context here. So please feel free. So in terms of content of the plan, or rather the proposal, and then ultimately the plan, this will involve both attention to substance, that is content, and attention to process. I was coming up with, or tried to come up with a list for you all. If we could only pick one single element to stress in a call like this for pre-proposal to kind of organize the comp plan process and content around, that gives you an illustration if we can come up with that. And I couldn't come up with just one. I did come up with two, and these are strictly illustration, but it's to give you an idea of both our most important problem and challenge, and also our greatest opportunity. The two I came up with, one is in terms of content recommendations, and the other is in terms of process. In terms of content, if we have to identify a single most important part of the comp plan process in terms of product produced, is some good recommendations and some attention paid to workforce housing in town of Estes Park. So for the town part of this, Leslie may have some additional thoughts when we get to the county part on that end. But as far as the town is concerned, it's identified by our town board, has been for years, is our number one problem. And it's not just as simple as saying we need X number of units. We already have that data. You've got a housing study in your resource page in the RFP, and I'd suggest you spend some time with that. So we know, give or take, we need quite a few units. It's in the 1,000 category. But I think even more important is how do we go about getting that problem solved? Where will those units go? How will they be facilitated? And how do we come out the other end with a sizable debt when the plan is implemented and code is rewritten after that to solving our workforce housing problem? So that's one example. It goes much deeper than that, of course. And when you read the housing analysis and the resources, you'll see some of the parameters we're up against. So that's our content. If I had to identify one process element that's the most important for this comp plan, it's going to be extensive public engagement, and specifically with the idea of public dialogue, not just one way, not just we're here and they give us their input and you know, that's it. There's no involvement. It's not going to be acceptable to our community. They have been very interested in this whole comp plan process, and I know they're interested in two-way communication. And then the process also is cumulative, so that as we gather information and keep going, it will build on what work has been done before by our consultants and what input we've had already from the public. So by the end of that, layer upon layer, we'll hopefully have a at least coherent and unified, or as best we can get to unified, series of recommendations out of that public process. But as I say, if there's one single thing that our community is real adamant about, it's going to be the public engagement. Questions about that? Okay, we'll keep going. I'll let you all peruse the content and conditions of the proposal submittal yourselves. Those are fairly boilerplate things, especially the submittal requirements. One thing I did want to stress, I already mentioned it with Michelle Stevens from Bang the Table being with us, but I want to flag it for your attention again. And that is number 7. This is on in section Roman numeral 2B, required proposal elements. And this bold-faced area explains as best we could in a single paragraph how that interface will work and what we would expect in the way of coordination. It's not all the detail, that just goes up in one bullet point in the RFP, but I imagine some of you will have questions or would like to know more about that, and we'll have time to discuss that. I know it's a little unusual to have a part of the consultant team already selected for you, and it's not our intent to say don't bring your own folks to the table. In particular, because Bang the Table is primarily an online or electronic public engagement facilitator and provider. The comp plan, like all comp plans, I don't see this ending anytime in the future, is going to have a component of what we might say is the old-fashioned original comp plan model. And that depends on the pandemic, but at some point that'll be over and we can have in-person meetings in a big room or around a table, something like that. We're all looking forward to that. That is a component, and that won't be, that is not an element that Bang the Table brings to us. So for those of you with a public engagement module that you bring to us with your proposal, which I hope you do, plan on something like the traditional meeting philosophy. In addition to that, innovative ways of reaching the public are going to be real important. And I'd rather not prejudice your thinking by making suggestions, but if you've got either good ideas or even better, good experiences in how to engage difficult to reach parts of the community, that would be great. Just wanted to illustrate the example. We do have a fairly significant and yet pretty invisible part of our population in Estes that's non-English first language. English is a second language. Most of the folks in that category have Spanish as their first language. So part of what would be really helpful to us isn't just the mechanics of that. You know, it'd be ideal to have bilingual representation in our consultant team. But beyond that, it's also what are some ways to reach a community that can be difficult to engage in the public process, partly due to language barrier, partly due to institutional concerns and so on. So anything that brings that element to the forefront as a component would be useful. Let's see, stop sharing. Okay, so in terms of the scope of work, that's further down on page 6 in the RFP if you're following. We've got some basics about Estes Park and Estes Valley. I'll let you read those on your own. They're probably no surprise to anyone who's even just visited the community. One of the interesting facts, and I'd use this to set the context if it helps, is that we're not a large population community. If you look at the US Census figures, about a little over 6,000 with resident population as the census counts that, and then somewhat less in the unincorporated Estes Valley at about 3,500, 3,500. But I think the next sentence that you see under scope of work is a critical one. Over 4 million visitors per year enter Rocky Mountain National Park. That's way out of proportion, so to speak, with our permanent population. And on any given busiest of the busy days in like July or August of each season, we can have a population, if you count warm bodies in town, if you look at those numbers, we can have an effective population of around 30,000, might be a little more. Those numbers are hard to come by, but that's partly the challenge we deal with. We're a community of maybe 10,000 in the entire valley, but we're dealing with a single day or, you know, a single peak value of influx that's considerably larger than that. So that has implications for how we design our infrastructure, what we need to do to prepare for housing for the future. And it's also an indication of the challenge that lies before us with public engagement. It's a hard population to reach, and yet it's vital. So ideas and innovative approaches that you know of would be important for that. Listing our stakeholders, you've seen those. I won't dwell on the list, but this is not meant to be a all-inclusive list. It's only a representative sample. Scope of services, that starts on page 7. This list isn't real radically different from other comp plan lists that I know a lot of you have dealt with. Mention our traditional and innovative processes for public engagement, social media, and so on. Background research, collecting data and information and evaluation, that's important. One of the things I wanted to stress is what we aren't looking for in the comp plan. The traditional kind of floor plan, I guess you'd call it for a comp plan, is having a future land use map. You know, I've done comprehensive plans over the years, and I think every one of them had some sort of future land use map. The idea is not to say we don't need that. We're interested in future land use and categorization, but what we don't want is parcel by parcel specific examination. A future land use map would be useful, but I think of it as kind of colored. I was about to say blobs. I guess that is the right word. Colored blobs on the map you can visualize. So it would be environmental areas that are important. Our river corridors, just to give you one example, have particular environmental constraints, and future land use in the river corridors would be important. But rivers don't pay attention to property boundaries, right? Especially when they flood. So that's one reason why we're not emphasizing a parcel by parcel approach. There are two other areas we aren't looking for a lot of detail. The comp plan will call out the initial items in these two areas. One of those is sub-area studies. Again, I'll tell you what we don't want. We're not looking for neighborhood plans. My judgment, that I think a lot of others agree with, is that Estes Park doesn't have a lot of differentiation in our residential neighborhoods. Sometimes the stratification of socioeconomic levels can be a bit different one area to the next. But, you know, having seen this in much larger cities, I know a good many of you have done that. We don't have the type of scope where a neighborhood by neighborhood analysis would lend a lot of value to the plan. And given our scope of budget, we did not want to ask you to do neighborhood planning. What we do want to see, it'd be ideal, is a stage set, not the actual analysis, but setting the stage to analyze for our corridor plans. One of our biggest challenges in Estes is we've got some corridors, usually they're the state highways, they're not always, but they're areas that maybe need redevelopment or haven't had sufficient attention paid to them to facilitate economic viability, economic growth in a sustainable way. So corridor planning, not to ask you to prepare specific corridor plans, that'll be a future task, but identifying what might need to be done through implementation to get that process started later on. Something very similar with systems level, comp plans usually have components for different systems, right? So a transportation plan, an infrastructure, say water and wastewater plan, a public safety component, things like that. Again, we're not looking for the actual plans to be done. Transportation master plan, something we need badly. It's actually one of the highest priorities in my judgment. But it would be beyond the budget and the scope and timeline for this plan to do a transportation master plan. Nevertheless, setting the stage for that, saying, you know, you've really got, again, just to throw out an example, you really got to work on your transit system. Tell us that, and we'll agree with you. We're behind on transit. So some of those elements I wanted to make sure you knew about are things we aren't necessarily looking for.
Hey, Randy.
Any questions? Yes.
So one thing that I'll tell this group, because this is something to look for in the future, is Director Greg Mahonen is Public Works Director. And of course, he's very interested in a transportation master plan. And he expects that, you know, following the comp plan, that will take place. So just a heads up for all of you that will probably be coming next. You know, pending budget and things like that.
Thank you, Christy. Good point. Keeping on with our list and scope, eventually the goal, of course, is to develop and refine a community vision with goals, objectives, and implementation strategies, 5-year and 20-year horizons. That's pretty boilerplate for a lot of comp plans, although those the spans of years can vary somewhat, but we're kind of going traditional here. 5 years and 20 years have got a lot of reliability and comp planning over the decades. So that I think would be a good way to approach that part. Let's see, we've got what we called in the comp plan a steering committee. I think we're going to actually be calling it an advisory committee. It's really a group, as we envision it, for ideas to be bounced off of and give us feedback, representing stakeholders that may not be able to follow the whole process all the way through day to day, but that can have representatives or stakeholder representatives in an ongoing format. So that group, as we envision it, will meet fairly often, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every month. We haven't figured out the exact pattern there yet. For the consultant who's working on the project, we wouldn't expect you to be at all of those meetings. We have it called out in bullet point 9 that we're looking for about 9 meetings over the duration of the project, a little more than a year and a half. And that spans a period of roughly every 8 to 10 weeks. So every 2 months or 2.5 months to have a dialogue with the advisory committee. That's in addition to some focus groups and things like that you've seen called out elsewhere in the plan. And then the grand finale is adoption by the appropriate officials. The county, Leslie, you can talk in a moment about how the county envisions that process. I'll be glad to hear your thoughts. For the town part of the process, it would be our town planning commission, 5-member body, and our town board, 7-member body, to put the final seal of approval on it, so to speak. And then what we've got coming out of that far end is launch immediately into rewriting our entire development code. The development code part of the task, the rewrite, is not part of this RFP, and we're not looking for proposals. It is part of our DOLA funding, but we've got a portion of it that we're saving back, basically, our town budget and the DOLA grant to do that. And that'll be a separate RFP and separate process. But we do envision that launching as seamlessly as we can make it happen at the end of the comp plan adoption process. And then a few thematic components, and then we'll hear from the county. As far as the overall thematic components, there's a plan for 3 miles outside municipal boundaries. Leslie, if it's okay with you, I'll let you talk about, I'd like to hear your thoughts on how that's to interface. We've got a requirement from DOLA, and our own community fully supports it as well, to identify and do what we can to mitigate natural and human hazards. You know, we're in an environment where natural hazards has done some scary things to our community. Many of you may know that last October we had to evacuate the entire town, all of it, because of the East Troublesome fire that started on the other side of Rocky Mountain National Park and then kept flinging embers over west to east. We got within a mile of the town of Estes Park with some significant possibilities there. So needless to say, we're on high alert whenever there's any remote risk of a wildfire. One example of many. Climate change, I put this in boldface because it's really important. I think all of us would agree, I certainly would, that we've got to be adaptable and sustainable in the face of climate change. It's already kind of almost too late. I hope it's not really too late. I don't think it's too late actually, but it's getting to be a significant thought that we got to pay attention to. So elements that deal in the plan with climate change, real important to us. Let's see, I've got others in here, but generally I think I've done all the talking I need to about that. And we do want to hear from the county. So Leslie, I'm down here on page 9. Would you like to take it away from that point? Scope of services for the county?
Sure, I'll jump in and I'll be brief. So first of all, the county is really piggybacking on to this effort. We appreciate the town leading this and managing the logistics of coordination and so on. We're allowed to, through our purchasing process, work with our municipalities or other partners to coordinate receiving of proposals and looking at consultant contract proposals and coordinating. And so our motivation and part of our interest in this is, I think, the historic partnership and relationship between the town and the county in the Estes Valley. There's an area that's within the 3 mile area, but outside the town limits, called the Estes Valley Planning Area that you probably read about in the RFP. And that came from the original comprehensive plan. When the county did its comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2019, that area was not addressed as part of our comprehensive plan inside the Estes Valley Planning Area, because at the time we still had the joint comprehensive plan between the town and the county, and there were ongoing conversations about agreements and working together. And so now we have a comprehensive plan that basically shows that area as blank and doesn't address it in the policies or anything. So our interest is in coordinating alongside this effort to make sure that that part of the county is also addressed for future planning purposes, and that the residents of the unincorporated area also are, part of the process and have opportunities to engage as well. We do have an environmental planning advisory committee that was recently formed that's very interested in being a sounding board and being part of the effort. Our Board of County Commissioners are interested in our Planning Commission as well. And so I think many of the things you heard Randy talk about are of mutual interest to us. I think some of the issues in the unincorporated area are a little bit different. It's much more rural. I think there are issues of what happens at the town edge and with regard to future growth and annexation. There are potentially more issues around open lands and wildlife and that kind of thing. And as you get into some of the more remote areas, we, I think, are open to what the final product looks like, whether it's part of the town's plan or a separate plan, but we do envision a separate adoption process and something that could be folded into our county comprehensive plan ultimately. Randy talked about the adoption process of the town. So our planning commission actually, the body that adopts the plan, and the county commissioners actually endorse or approve the adoption ultimately. So I think those are probably the main things I would say. We do anticipate at the county having staff who would work alongside the consultant team to help prepare some of the deliverables, to work on community engagement, to be part of the effort. Our budget is certainly more limited than the town's budget, and it's a bit flexible because we want to see what comes in the proposal, and we have to go through a budget carryover request process. So it's limited, but we're interested to see what the proposers have to say. And our goal is to ultimately work with the same contractor that the town selects, that we would look at and review together, and that the town would select and we would work with, and have a parallel but separate contract with the same contractor. I think those are probably the highlights, and then I'm certainly able to answer any questions that may come up through this discussion if there are some. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Leslie. Any questions for Leslie or county related question? Okay, seeing none. Really, I've only got one other thing to talk to you about, and that's everybody's favorite. What's the bottom line budget-wise? I know some granting agencies don't want you to put the budget for the project in your RFP. I'm happy to say DOLA is not one of those. I'm a firm believer in letting everybody know up front what your budget target is. And we've all been through this, right? We've got a specific budget. We know that your proposals will probably all have a price tag in your own internal due diligence that'll come up and match that pretty closely. So on page 12, we have the estimated project budget, $164,000. And that is a pretty hard and fast figure. I've got to be straight up and tell everybody that, like a lot of the country, a lot of Colorado, and no different in Estes Park, we're not looking at flush budget projections for the next few years. We're looking at not, catastrophe level budget cuts, but we're not looking at much growth. So that is a pretty firm number. The DOLA part is very fixed in place, and our local match is 50% of that. Having said that in kind of a gloomy way, I'll just add that at the same time, the town is not looking at major staff reductions. We're, again, barring craziness, we're looking at keeping the figure in place as you see it here. This figure, the entire amount for the town's match, is in the current 2021 budget. It is one of the few things that, one of the few big ticket things that made it through our budget process last year. So that it not only gives you reassurance that, the money will be there unless we do something really nuts, but it also gives you a sense that the community is behind us. We have been recognizing for a long time that we need a new comp plan, and finally all the dominoes fell together, grants and so on. So that's I think, a respectable budget. We'll be very interested in what you and your teams have to say about it, but that's actually the biggest budget I've ever had for a comp plan. So I'm looking forward to seeing what innovative ideas you guys can come up with to how to make that amount of money work. Down at the bottom on. Yes.
Randy, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Roger actually has a question. So Roger, if you'd unmute yourself, please.
Yes, hi. My
Roger.
question, hi, Randy. My question is about Bang the Table. Is their fee included in the $164,000 as well?
No, it's separate. Thanks for
Okay.
asking, Roger. We have a separate contract, and the full 164 is the amount that would be available for those proposing in this scope that we've got here.
Okay.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you.
follow-up on Bang the Table? We're working with it right now on a project. Is it a tool that the town has used before? And is it expected that the consultant would be the one maintaining the site, or would the town be doing that?
I'll say we have not used them before. In fact, our contract with them is brand new. And I should tell Michelle, you're supposed to have that in your hands by now. And I had a sick day yesterday, so I didn't get to that, but we're going to have it for you. I guess Ellie, I would ask Michelle if she would like to.
I can add my 2 cents. The city hasn't been through site or project administration training yet. I would expect the consultant to plan on probably the creation of the homepage as well as the management of the project pages. I would assume that it's all you, at least until the town gets a bit more familiarity with that. But we would be doing the training for your team as well, the project administrator training.
And Michelle, that's part, as far as the training goes, that's part of the budget we have with you. So for those who are selected for consultant and partnership, it would be, I would say, a modest amount of time to go through the training, but
like an hour.
Yeah, okay, that's modest.
For anybody, like the consultants who'll be working on it, it's about an hour. And as far as time commitment, whatever you would be already, whatever you're used to for administering project websites, about that. Depends on how much other outreach and activities you include.
And we are flexible. This is where those of you who will be putting in proposals, this is where your experience and your design expertise will be of great interest to you. We're trying not to be overly rigid, as I hope you've picked up on, that we want to hear the best and the brightest and the most creative ideas. Other questions? I was about to mention that, and Leslie, my apologies, you may have said this in passing and I might not have heard it, but the county estimated budget is 40,000. That's at the top of page 13. And Leslie, I believe that's a very round number version. Is that fair to say? Okay, you're muted, I think, but you're nodding. So that's round number it is.
Yes, that's correct.
And Randy, one other question, Shelby, if you, thank you.
Thanks so
Yes,
much.
Shelby.
Hi, yeah, on page 9, there's an component that is sort of a subsection related to recommendations from DOLA. And one of the components is a water supply and conservation component. And then it says in parentheses that CWCB might be able to fund this component. Is this something that you all are pursuing in conjunction with this effort, or is that just a blanket recommendation from DOLA that's kind of required in this RFP?
That's a great question. You know, Christy, you might be our best information on that part. I think you've worked with.
Yes,
Oh,
so
yes.
that's a great question. Thank you. We haven't pursued anything yet. It's actually on my long list of to-dos to confirm that, but I think it would be great if the consultant selected could assist with that and find out more about CWCB. It could only really help to make it a little more robust. So very good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're into pure Q&A time. So any questions you have, let's hear them.
This is Patrick Raleigh with Stanislaus and Associates. The gorilla in the room, how about COVID? What do you anticipate over the course of the project that we're going to be dealing with? Are we going to be able to have in-person meetings, so on and so forth?
If I had to put a time limit on based on what we know of vaccine schedule and ability to open back up, right now we are not having any in-person meetings for Town of Estes Park. That's been the case since last March. But if progress continues to roll along with vaccine, herd immunity, whatever it may be, we expect, I'll go out on a limb and say by the fall of 2021, by this fall, we may ease into more in-person meetings. And I would surely hope that by the time the project approaches completion next year, let's say by midsummer next year, we'll be back to full-fledged as needed, on-demand meetings. Short of that, or meanwhile, it's probably things like we're doing right now, Zoom gatherings. It's not the most ideal thing for gathering public input, but we got.
Thank you.
Randy, Jeremy has a question. Jeremy, if you would unmute, please.
Good afternoon, Randy. This is Jeremy with Logan Simpson. And
Hi, Jeremy.
My question is Larimer County's budget included within the town's 164, or should we anticipate that the funding that they're able to secure would be in addition to 164,000?
Let me defer to Leslie on that particular one.
It would be in addition to, it's completely separate from and in addition to.
Thank you.
So Leslie, if we go with the 40,000 that your round number estimating, the entirety of the consulting project work would be in the neighborhood of 200,000, 204, something like that.
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Randy.
I was just going to add that some of the work we would envision being overlapped. If we have a major public event, either online or in person, that involves having people participate in a meeting, I think it'd be easy to combine those on town and county and solicit input that way. It's really better for the public, I think, if they don't have to kind of double up on their meetings.
And Randy, Emily has a question. Emily, if you'd unmute, please.
Thanks. Emily Felton with Kimley Horn. My question is back to the public outreach component of all of this. What I heard you say was that this is very important. And what I heard you say is there's a population who lives here full time and then a visitor population as well. Can you help us decipher how the town ranks public outreach to both permanent residents and then visitors as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is one that we're a little bit out on thin ice on because we haven't done it this way before. Our previous comp plan was almost entirely residents and other resident stakeholders, business people in town, for example. I wish I had a magic answer for you. There's no automatic balance point. I will tell you that I think our plan would be deficient if we didn't have a way to involve the visitor population. I don't know that has to be direct contact. We say in the office humorously, like if I'm on vacation and Estes Park or anywhere, and somebody with a clipboard comes up and says, "Hey, do you mind answering 3 questions about our comprehensive plan?" I'd say, I'm here to have fun, guys. I'm a planner and I'm not going to do it. So I would expect others to do it. As one suggestion though, for example, our lodging industry folks, they're probably a key interface component between the visitors. Not all our visitors stay overnight in Estes, but a good proportion of them do. And being able to tap into their expertise. It can be tough. I'm guessing it will be tough to tap in one-on-one. We know it's tough. I worked in Daytona Beach for a while, and if you go up to people on the beach and say, you want to hear about planning, they'll run into the ocean, get away from you. So it is a tough nut to crack. Yeah, that's a good question, Emily. I don't have a magic answer, but I would say the components themselves are vital. We definitely want to have representation from our visitors. Our permanent residents probably will be there no matter what because they have a direct stay, and we do have an involved community. But with that said, I think some outreach affirmatively to them would be in the picture as well. It wouldn't be just waiting for them to show up and speak. It would be a piece of an outreach to them.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And Randy, I'm just going to add, we recently did an electric vehicle readiness plan, and we had to do all the outreach remotely. And we conducted a lot of one-on-one interviews as well as a public meeting through Zoom that actually ended up pretty good. I think if we, the visitor involvement is pretty good if it's something that is somewhat controversial and their connection with either retail or restaurants or lodging is impacted, which I think we could make the case. And an example is, I hate to bring this up, but one of the most controversial projects in the town has been what's called the Downtown Estes Loop, DEL. And visitor input on that one has been pretty significant all along. So it gives you an example. So I think the comp plan could be something that the visitors might be interested in if it impacts, what they think is Estes Park and what they love about Estes Park.
Let me throw in one other thought along. Thank you, Christy. That's good advice. Let me throw in one other thought. As you saw called out in the first part of the RFP text, we went through a pretty detailed pre-planning effort in 2018 to gather together ideas on who are our stakeholders, what are some good model approaches, and how would that be likely to unfold in the plan itself. To the extent it helps, I'll throw out that we had 4 comprehensive plans from other communities. They were all pretty new in 2018. They've got a little more knowledge on them now. And there may be better examples than the 4 I'm about to give you, but at least as of that effort, when we got into depth with it, there were 4 comprehensive plans out there that we thought were real valuable and introduced different ways of going about both engagement and organization of contents and final product. The 4 are Austin, Texas, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Jackson, Wyoming, and Park City, Utah. Rather than spend a lot of time, reiterating why we like those particular ones, I would just encourage you all to have a look at each of those 4 plans. I will say one thought about Oklahoma City. They, of course, as you all are in the planning profession know, won an APA award in 2017 or 18 for their new comprehensive plan. And it had the type of extensive public outreach and engagement that we were hoping to see with our plan. Oklahoma City is a lot bigger, a lot larger than Estes Park, so not all the content there would be transferable with budget and so on, but I thought they did a good job. Park City is in there, in fact, because they're like us. They are a heavily visitor-oriented community, and on peak days, the winter for them, since they're a ski town, their population is considerable of warm bodies in town is considerably bigger than the permanent population. And they did find some good tools in their toolkit to be able to involve visitors in Park City. Somewhat similar in Jackson. Jackson, Wyoming is in there as much as anything because their number one problem is our number one problem. And that's how do you find workforce housing in a confined mountain valley? It's a tough nut to crack. And then Austin's in there just because Austin, Texas does great things. Other questions?
Does the town have a set standard around translation services? Is that something you guys usually do? Would we include in our budget?
Or translation services? No, we don't actually. We don't have a budget for that. That's a good question. I think some of what we'd be interested in hearing from you all who propose is what sort of modules could be brought to the table with that. At the same time, it is something we're keenly interested in, want to work on. So it may be a work in progress as we go through the planning process. But I would say if you include some translation elements, that would not go remiss.
Yeah, in Public Works, we're just now starting to do some making sure that we've got bilingual services, but we also have a very difficult time reaching the population that English as a second language because, you know, that's really our service industry people. And as we all know, you know, they work multiple jobs and, you know, balancing their children in and out of school. So it's a challenge. And I know that there's, like Randy said, a big interest in reaching that population because there's a significant number of Spanish speaking families in the community.
Yeah, it's a logistical challenge, not just putting the materials in a different language challenge for sure.
It is. We do have some good partnerships. The school district has actually been very helpful in helping to interface with that population. So they are one of the supporters of this comp plan. They wrote a pretty good letter that DOLA, I saw it. And being able to work through them, I think, on specific tasks would be a valuable thing to consider. Other questions?
Hey, Randy.
Yeah, Michelle.
I just want everybody to know that if you want to learn more about Bang the Table or have any questions specific to the platform, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to talk about the platform and what that looks like.
Thanks, Michelle. If it doesn't overwhelm you, I'd say touching base with Michelle is a good idea.
Yeah, and we'll send out the list of participants with their email contacts with the addenda. Thanks.
Let's see, I think I have covered everything. Oh, I did want to mention one thing about budget. One of the questions that comes up often is, should we or can we build in a contingency? And I guess I'm not much of a believer in contingency as a built-in component. That's real important, of course, in capital construction projects, because you've got to be able to account for the unknown that you find underground when you're digging for pipes or digging for road base or whatever. I'm less convinced myself that it's a necessity, but I will put in context that if the event demands it, you know, let's say we get twice as many people showing up from the public at our series of public meetings, and it takes extra time to digest that and reconcile all that, and maybe one or two more meetings to bring it all together. The staff will be glad to have in-kind contribution. In other words, we'll be there to interface in the final analysis. So if that helps to know that, that's how we would go about it. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Let me again thank all of you for turning out. This is a terrific turnout. I haven't seen even an in-person pre-proposal meeting that got the numbers we got here online, maybe because it's online, not traveling. But in any case, we really appreciate it. We know that the more possibilities are out there, the more innovative things we can bring to the table. So give it your best shot. I'll just mention that we all love Estes Park, and it's kind of a national or international treasure that we don't want to see fall by the wayside. We've got a delicate balancing act, and you'll all be aware of this. You probably are already. There's only so many visitors that you could accommodate in a confined mountain valley, and yet, although we have a lot of efforts underway to diversify our economy, visitor and visitation, whether to the national park or in Estes itself, is always going to be, that's our biggest Easter basket, right, out of all the baskets. So how we reconcile what can, if it gets overwhelming, be damaging to the land and the environment, but at the same time providing for economic sustainability, delicate balance. So again, I'm not saying anything I'm sure you guys haven't thought of, but if that sort of thematic concept helps, we'll put that out there. Well, again, thanks everybody for coming. You've got, you'll see the email. Christy, if you could send the Excel spreadsheet to our participants, that would be terrific. Thanks. And any questions that you have, bear in mind we've got the deadline to receive the additional questions, but by this time next week, all those will come back to all participants on this call and any others that we hear from in the form of an addendum. So ask when you think of them, we'll get you the answers. And thanks again, everybody. We'll go ahead and end the call now, but any questions, like I say, feel free to reach out. Happy to help us all get to the best plan we can get.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Randy.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.